I am Dorothy, 32 years old, and a freelance graphic designer. Never in my life did I imagine standing in a courtroom trembling as I faced my own father across the aisle. He was suing me for $75,000, a debt I had no knowledge of ever taking on. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife. Looking down at the loan documents, something caught my eye about one particular signature. It didn't look right. Before I continue with how my own father tried to financially ruin me, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and subscribe to hear more stories about justice being served. Growing up with my father, Wayne, was like walking on eggshells. At 58, he ran a small construction company in our hometown of Dayton, Ohio, with an iron fist. Every decision from what we ate for dinner to what careers we should pursue went through him first. His word was law in our household, and questioning him was never an option. My mother, Sylvia, 55, had long ago surrendered her voice. A stay-at-home mom who devoted her life to keeping the peace. She would nod along with whatever my father said, even when her eyes told a different story. I would catch her sometimes staring out the kitchen window while washing dishes, looking like she wanted to be anywhere else. Then there was my brother Frank, 36, the golden child. 4 years older than me, he followed perfectly in our father's footsteps. After getting his accounting degree, he went straight to work for Dad's company handling the books and gradually becoming Dad's right-hand man. They were two peas in a pod, with Frank soaking up every bit of praise Dad threw his way. I was different. From an early age, I was drawn to color, shapes, and design. My notebooks were filled with doodles instead of numbers. I wanted to create beautiful things, not build structures or balance ledgers. This difference made me the family outsider. "Art won't pay the bills, Dorothy," my father would say whenever he caught me sketching. "You need something practical, something real." By the time I finished high school, the tension was unbearable. Dad insisted I study business administration or accounting. I refused and applied to art school instead. When my acceptance letter came with only a partial scholarship, Dad seized the opportunity. "See, even they don't think you're good enough for a full ride, and I'm not wasting my money on this nonsense." I worked 2 jobs that summer, saving every penny, but it wasn't enough. Heartbroken, I enrolled in the local community college, taking general courses while still dreaming of escape. For 3 years I played along, but the fire inside me never died. I took night classes in graphic design, built a small portfolio, and applied for internships in bigger cities. When I finally landed an unpaid opportunity in Los Angeles, I knew it was now or never. The night I told my family I was leaving was the worst fight we'd ever had. Dad called me ungrateful, foolish, destined to fail. Frank backed him up, of course, saying I was being selfish and abandoning the family. Only Mom remained silent, her eyes fixed on her plate, as Dad's voice boomed through the dining room. "If you walk out that door," he threatened, pointing his fork at me, "don't expect any help when you come crawling back, broke and desperate." I left anyway. At 22, with barely $2,000 to my name, I moved to Los Angeles. Those first years were beyond difficult. I shared a tiny apartment with 2 other girls in a not-so-great neighborhood. During the day, I worked at Sunrise Coffee Shop serving lattes to aspiring actors and screenwriters. At night, I hunched over my second-hand laptop, taking any freelance design jobs I could find, mostly logo work for small businesses, paying next to nothing. $60 for a logo that took you 15 hours, my roommate Carol would ask, shaking her head. "That's less than minimum wage." "It's for my portfolio," I'd explain. "Once I have enough good work to show, better clients will come." For 3 years, I lived on ramen noodles and hope. I sent out hundreds of applications, faced countless rejections, and cried myself to sleep more times than I can count. But slowly things began to change. My portfolio grew stronger. A small job led to a referral, which led to another. My rates gradually increased from embarrassingly low to almost sustainable. The turning point came when Riverside Marketing hired me for a branding project. It wasn't huge, but it was legitimate work for a real company, not just someone's garage band or homemade soap business. The day I could quit my coffee shop job was one of the proudest of my life. Through all of this, contact with my family was minimal. Mom would call occasionally when Dad wasn't around. Frank sent obligatory birthday texts. Dad never reached out once. When I would mention my growing client list or successful projects during rare calls home, Dad would dismiss them as doodling or playing on the computer. The fact that I was actually building a career seemed impossible for him to acknowledge. After 5 years in LA, I had finally established myself. I had a steady stream of clients, a small but comfortable one-bedroom apartment in a decent area, and even some savings. For the first time in my life, I felt proud of what I had accomplished completely on my own terms and without a penny of help from my father. "You did it, Dorothy," my friend Janet told me over celebratory drinks after I landed my biggest client yet. "You proved them all wrong." I thought I had escaped the shadow of my family's disapproval. I thought I was finally free to live my life. I had no idea that my father's reach was longer than I imagined, or that the worst betrayal was yet to come. The first sign that something was wrong came on an ordinary Tuesday morning. I was working on designs for a new restaurant chain when my phone lit up with a name I rarely saw: Frank. My brother and I hadn't spoken in nearly 2 years, not since my last trip home for Christmas had ended in another argument with Dad about my waste of potential. Curious, I answered. "Dorothy, it's Frank." His voice sounded tense, different from his usual confident tone. "Hey, what's up?" I tried to keep my voice casual, though alarm bells were already ringing in my head. "Listen, I can't talk long. Dad might check my call log. But you need to be careful. The company's in trouble, financial trouble. Dad's been borrowing money from various places. I'm worried about what he might do." "What do you mean, borrowing, like loans?" There was a pause. Then Frank lowered his voice even further. "Not exactly. Look, just check your credit report, okay? And maybe call Mom when Dad's at work. She's been signing a lot of papers lately." Before I could ask more questions, he hung up. I sat staring at my phone, a knot forming in my stomach. Frank and I had our differences, but he wouldn't call out of the blue like this without reason. That afternoon, I checked my mailbox and found an envelope from Ohio Valley Bank, an institution I'd never done business with. Inside was a past due notice for a loan payment of $2,500, part of a $75,000 loan apparently taken out in my name 3 years earlier. My hands shook as I read the details. According to the letter, I had borrowed the money for business startup costs and had made payments for about a year before they stopped coming. Now the account was 90 days delinquent, and they were threatening legal action. Panicking, I pulled up my credit report online. There it was, a $75,000 loan from Ohio Valley Bank opened 3 years ago with the last payment made 8 months earlier. The most shocking detail was the address listed on the loan, my parents' home address in Dayton, not my apartment in Los Angeles. I called the bank immediately, explaining that I had never taken out this loan and suspected fraud. The customer service representative was sympathetic but firm. "The loan application has your social security number, date of birth, and signature Ms. Parker. It was processed in person at our Dayton branch. We have all the documentation on file." My mind was spinning. I hadn't set foot in Dayton at the time this loan was supposedly initiated. I was working double shifts at Sunrise Coffee and barely making rent in Los Angeles. With trembling fingers, I called my father's number. He answered on the 4th ring, his voice gruff as always. "What?" "Dad, it's Dorothy. I just got a letter about a $75,000 loan in my name from Ohio Valley Bank. I never took out this loan. Do you know anything about this?" There was a pause, just a beat too long. "No idea what you're talking about. Probably some scam. You should be more careful with your information." His tone was dismissive, but something felt off. "Dad, this is serious. They're saying I'm 90 days late on payments. This could ruin my credit. The address on the loan is your house." "Well, I don't know anything about it," he snapped. "Maybe you forgot about some paperwork you signed before you ran off to California. Not my problem. He hung up before I could respond. I sat in stunned silence, his words echoing in my head. Could I have signed something without realizing what it was? No, that was impossible. I would remember borrowing $75,000. That evening, my phone rang again. It was my mother calling from her secret cell phone that Dad didn't know about. Dorothy, are you okay? Her voice was hushed, anxious. Mom, do you know anything about a loan from Ohio Valley Bank in my name? She was quiet for so long I thought we'd been disconnected. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Your father had me sign some papers a few years ago. He said they were just formalities for the business tax things. There were so many pages, Dorothy. I just signed where he told me to. My blood ran cold. Did you sign my name to anything? Another long pause. No, I wouldn't do that, but Wayne had a lot of papers. He might have, I don't know for sure. In the background, I heard a door slam. I have to go, my mother whispered urgently, and the line went dead. The next day, I called Barbara Lewis, a lawyer specializing in financial fraud, who had been recommended by a client. She was a no-nonsense woman of 45, with a reputation for fighting hard for her clients. After hearing my story, she didn't mince words. This sounds like identity theft, which is a serious crime even when it's committed by family members. Actually, especially when it's committed by family members, since they have easy access to your personal information. What should I do? I asked, feeling overwhelmed. First, file a police report. Yes, even if it implicates your father, she added, seeing my hesitation. Second, dispute the loan with the credit bureaus. Third, we need to get copies of all the loan documents, especially the original application with the signature. If someone forged your signature, we can prove it. I followed Barbara's advice, though filing the police report was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. The officer taking my statement looked skeptical when I explained that I suspected my own father of identity theft, but he filed the report anyway. What I didn't know then was that my father was already preparing his counterattack, one that would drag me into court and nearly destroy everything I had worked so hard to build. The thick envelope arrived by certified mail 6 weeks later. I had to sign for it, the delivery man watching impassively as I scrawled my real signature across his electronic pad. Inside was a court summons. My father, Wayne Parker, was suing me for the full amount of the loan plus interest and legal fees, claiming I had borrowed the money with his co-signature to start my business and was now refusing to repay it. I sat on my couch reading and rereading the legal document until the words blurred together. My own father was taking me to court. Not just denying involvement, not just refusing to help, but actively attacking me. The document included a sworn statement from Frank, claiming he had been present when Dad gave me the cash from the loan, allegedly watching me count out $75,000 at our family dining table before I moved to California. This was a complete fabrication. I had left for LA with barely $2,000 to my name, saved from my retail job during community college. The idea that I would have hidden $75,000 while working 60-hour weeks at a coffee shop and eating ramen noodles for dinner was absurd. I called Barbara immediately, my voice shaking as I explained the new development. This is actually good news, she said, surprising me. Now we can subpoena all the records and get to the bottom of this. Your father just opened the door to his own undoing. What Barbara didn't know yet was how deep the rabbit hole went. That same week, I received notices from 2 credit card companies about overdue payments on accounts I'd never opened. Both were high-limit cards, maxed out at $15,000 and $20,000 respectively. Both listed my parents' address for billing. Both had been opened around the same time as the bank loan. When I checked my credit report again, I found 3 more accounts, another credit card, with a $10,000 balance, a personal line of credit for $25,000, and a store credit account at a high-end furniture store with a balance of $8,000. In total, there was nearly $120,000 of debt in my name that I knew nothing about. I called my mother again, desperate for answers. This time she didn't pick up. Instead, I received a text message an hour later. Can't talk. Your father checks my phone. He's very angry about the police report. Be careful. Barbara advised me to gather as much evidence as possible about my whereabouts during the time these accounts were opened. I pulled my employment records from Sunrise Coffee, showing I was working shifts in Los Angeles when the loan application was supposedly signed in person in Dayton. I gathered rent receipts, utility bills, anything that proved I was in California, not Ohio. Meanwhile, the stress was taking a physical toll. I couldn't sleep, spending nights staring at the ceiling, replaying every interaction with my family, wondering how it had come to this. My appetite disappeared. Design projects that would normally take me days stretched into weeks as I struggled to focus. I started losing clients. Janet, my closest friend in LA, became my lifeline. She brought over food when I forgot to eat, sat with me through panic attacks, and even loaned me money when legal fees started draining my savings. I ran into your brother last month, you know, she mentioned one evening as we split a pizza I had barely touched. At that industry mixer in San Diego. He was there with some construction suppliers. I looked up surprised. Frank was in California. He didn't call me. Janet shifted uncomfortably. He was pretty drunk by the time I recognized him. Started bragging about some family business stuff. Said something about teaching you a lesson about loyalty. She hesitated. I didn't think much of it at the time, just wrote it off as drunk talk, but now, a cold feeling spread through my chest. Frank knew. He had warned me with that cryptic call, but he was still helping Dad, still backing up his lies. My own brother, who had shared bunk beds with me as a kid, who had taught me to ride a bike, was actively participating in trying to destroy my life. That night I cried until there were no tears left, mourning the family I thought I had, facing the reality of the family I actually had. By morning, sadness had hardened into resolve. If they wanted a fight, they would get one. With the court date approaching, Barbara and I worked tirelessly to build our defense. The core of our case was simple. I wasn't in Ohio when the loan and credit accounts were opened, so I couldn't have signed the applications. My old boss at Sunrise Coffee, Howard, a 50-year-old former accountant who had opened the cafe after burning out in corporate America, was incredibly helpful. He provided detailed work schedules showing I was on shift during specific dates when transactions occurred in Ohio. I remember you working those double shifts, he said when I called to thank him. You were saving up for that design course. There's no way you were jetting back and forth to Ohio. Kathleen, my first major client at Riverside Marketing, also came through with documentation of our in-person meetings and project timelines, all placing me firmly in California during critical dates. This is outrageous, she said when I explained the situation. We've worked together for years. I know your character. We'll make sure the truth comes out. The most surprising help came from Gerald, a former bank employee who had processed some of my father's business loans years earlier. I found him through a friend of a friend, and while he was initially reluctant to get involved, something about my story convinced him. Your father came in frequently with pre-signed documents, Gerald revealed during our coffee meeting. The branch manager flagged it once, but nothing came of it. Wayne Parker was a big customer, brought in a lot of business. While gathering evidence, I unexpectedly ran into Frank at a local coffee shop during my brief return to Dayton to meet with Barbara. He was leaving as I was entering, and for a moment we just stared at each other, the weight of betrayal hanging between us. Dorothy, he finally said, his expression a mix of guilt and defiance. You shouldn't have gone to the police. You lied about me, I replied, keeping my voice low despite the anger boiling inside me. You said you watched Dad give me money that I never received. How could you do that, Frank? He glanced around nervously, then pulled me outside to the nearly empty parking lot. You don't understand. The company is going under. Dad put everything into that resort development in Kentucky and it failed. We're talking millions in debt. So you decided to put some of that debt in my name? I asked incredulously. Frank ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache despite everything. It wasn't supposed to go this far. Dad said he just needed to move some numbers around temporarily. Then one thing led to another and you chose him over me, over the truth. He's my boss, Dorothy. My whole life is tied up in the company. What was I supposed to do? Not commit fraud would have been a good start, I snapped. Frank's face hardened. We'll see what the judge says. Dad has friends in this town. People respect him. As he walked away, I realized just how deep the family deception went. Frank wasn't just following orders. He had convinced himself their actions were justified. I tried repeatedly to contact my mother during that visit, but every attempt was blocked. It wasn't until the night before I was due to fly back to LA that I received a text from an unknown number. It's Mom. New phone. Wayne doesn't know. Be ready. He has been practicing his testimony. Says he has proof you took the money. I'm so sorry. I should have been stronger. Barbara, meanwhile, had been digging into my father's past and found something significant. 10 years earlier, Wayne had been investigated for financial irregularities related to a subcontractor on a government project. The case had been settled out of court, the record sealed. But the pattern was there, a history of financial manipulation when things got tight. Your father isn't new to this game, Barbara told me as we prepared our final strategy for court. But this time he picked the wrong victim. We're going to expose everything. As the court date loomed closer, my resolve strengthened. This wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. It was about standing up to the manipulation and control that had shadowed my entire life. For the first time, I wasn't running away from my father. I was standing my ground. The county courthouse was an imposing building of red brick and stone columns designed to intimidate with its grandeur. As Barbara and I walked up the wide steps, I felt like David approaching Goliath, armed with nothing but the truth against a lifetime of my father's manipulation. Inside the courtroom was wood-paneled and formal, with rows of spectator benches, most empty on this Tuesday morning. Judge Margaret Wilson presided, a stern-faced woman of 60, with silver hair and penetrating eyes that seemed to look right through you. She had a reputation for being tough but fair, which Barbara assured me was good for our case. My father and Frank arrived with Raymond Johnson, a prominent local attorney known for representing the city's business elite. Dad looked confident in his best suit, nodding to several people in the room who clearly knew him. Frank avoided my gaze, staring straight ahead with a blank expression I recognized from childhood, the one he wore when trying to disappear during family conflicts. What surprised me was who wasn't there: my mother. I had expected Dad to parade the whole united family in front of the judge, but Sylvia's absence was conspicuous. The proceedings began with Wayne's attorney presenting their case. Raymond Johnson was smooth and persuasive, painting a picture of a generous father supporting his daughter's California dreams with a substantial loan only to be betrayed when she refused to repay it. Your Honor, we have documentation showing that Ms. Parker received $75,000 from her father, co-signed by him, at Ohio Valley Bank. For over a year, payments were made on schedule. Then, as Ms. Parker's design business began to succeed, the payments mysteriously stopped. Mr. Parker made several good faith attempts to resolve this matter privately, but his daughter refused to acknowledge her obligation. Dad took the stand, next at his performance deserving of an Oscar. He spoke of his pride in my artistic talents, his concerns about the competitive industry, and his desire to help despite his reservations. He described in detail how he had withdrawn the loan amount in cash at my request to avoid business loan paperwork and higher interest rates. I just wanted to help her, Your Honor. All I asked was that she pay it back when she could. Now she's doing well, and suddenly she claims she never got the money. It breaks my heart. I felt physically ill listening to the lies flow so easily from my father's mouth. The fabricated concern, the false generosity, all covering up what he had actually done, stolen my identity, and potentially ruined my financial future. Frank testified next, claiming he had been present at the family home when Dad counted out the cash and handed it to me. He provided specific details like how I had brought a blue backpack to carry the money, and how we had talked about the California apartment I planned to rent with some of the funds. She was excited, Frank said, still not meeting my eyes. Said this was her big break, that she'd pay Dad back double once she made it big. Barbara remained calm throughout their testimony, taking careful notes but not reacting visibly to even the most outrageous claims. When it was our turn, she approached the matter methodically. Your Honor, we contend that not only did Ms. Parker never receive this money, but that the loan itself is fraudulent. The signature on the loan documents is not hers, and we can prove it. Barbara presented my work records showing I was clocked in at Sunrise Coffee in Los Angeles on the day the loan documents were supposedly signed in person in Dayton. She showed rental agreements, utility bills, even Instagram posts geotagged in California. It would have been impossible for me to be in two places at once. Then came the critical moment. Barbara requested that the original loan application be entered into evidence and projected on the courtroom screen. She placed it side by side with verified samples of my signature from my driver's license, passport, and rental agreements. As you can see, Your Honor, these signatures are significantly different. The one on the loan application lacks the distinctive loop on the Y in Dorothy, and the cross on the T extends much further than in Ms. Parker's actual signature. We've had a handwriting expert analyze these documents, and their report confirms these discrepancies. Judge Wilson leaned forward, examining the signatures with a frown. The differences were obvious even to an untrained eye. My real signature was rounded and flowing. The one on the loan document was more angular with different pressure points. Just as Barbara was about to continue, the courtroom door opened. Every head turned to see my mother Sylvia walking slowly down the aisle. She looked smaller than I remembered, her shoulders hunched as if carrying an invisible weight. But her eyes were clear and determined as she approached the bench. Your Honor, she said quietly, I need to testify in this case. My father half rose from his seat, his face flushing with anger. Sylvia, what are you doing? He hissed. The judge gavelled for order. Mr. Parker, sit down. Mrs. Parker, are you represented by counsel here today? No, Your Honor. I'm here on my own. I have information relevant to this case. After being sworn in, my mother sat in the witness box, hands folded tightly in her lap. For a moment she looked directly at me, and I saw both apology and resolve in her eyes. Mrs. Parker, Barbara began gently, do you have knowledge about the loan in question? Yes, my mother said, her voice gaining strength. Wayne asked me to sign many documents over the years. Sometimes he would have me sign blank forms that he said he would fill out later for the business. Other times there were stacks of papers with little sticky tabs showing where to sign. Did you ever sign your daughter's name to any documents? No, she said firmly. But Wayne would sometimes have practice papers where he would try out signatures. I found some in his office drawer once with Dorothy's name written over and over. Raymond Johnson jumped to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. This is hearsay and speculation. I saw him do it. My mother continued, ignoring the objection. 2 years ago, when Dorothy refused to sign some partnership papers for the business, he said, No problem, I can handle it, and then practiced her signature until he got it right. The courtroom fell silent. My father's face had gone from red to white, his eyes boring into my mother with a fury that made me fear for her safety after this was over. Barbara seized the moment. Your Honor, we have additional evidence that Ms. Parker was physically in Los Angeles on May 17th, 3 years ago, the exact date this loan was supposedly signed in person in Dayton. Not only do we have her work time card, but we have security camera footage from the coffee shop showing her working that day. She played a short clip on the courtroom monitor, clearly showing me behind the counter at Sunrise Coffee, date and timestamp visible in the corner. It was irrefutable proof that I couldn't have been in Ohio signing loan documents. Judge Wilson studied the evidence carefully, then looked directly at my father. Mr. Parker, this footage places your daughter in California on the day you claim she was in Ohio signing for this loan. How do you explain this discrepancy? My father looked to his lawyer, who was frantically flipping through papers. After a whispered conference, Raymond stood. Your Honor, perhaps there is some confusion about the exact date. The important fact remains that the money was provided. Was it? The judge asked sharply. Because I'm looking at evidence suggesting the signature on this loan is not Ms. Parker's. And now I'm hearing testimony that Mr. Parker may have practiced forging his daughter's signature. She examined the loan document again, this time with much greater scrutiny. After a moment, she looked up, her expression stern. This court takes a very dim view of fraudulent documents being presented as evidence. Mr. Johnson, did you personally verify the authenticity of these signatures before bringing this case? Raymond Johnson looked uncomfortable. We relied on our client's assurance, Your Honor. The judge's gaze hardened. I see. In light of the evidence presented, I am dismissing this case. Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for investigation into potential fraud, forgery, and identity theft. She looked directly at my father. Mr. Parker, I strongly advise you to retain criminal defense counsel. Court officers, please detain Mr. Parker while I draft the referral. Two uniformed officers approached my father, whose face had gone from white to gray. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes as the reality of his situation sank in. This is ridiculous, he shouted, looking wildly around the room. Sylvia, how could you do this to me? Frank, say something. Frank sat frozen, staring at his hands. My mother watched with sad eyes as the man she had been afraid to contradict for decades was led away from the table. In that moment, as the judge's gavel came down and the case collapsed around my father's lies, I felt a strange mixture of vindication and grief. The truth had finally come to light, but at the cost of whatever remained of my family. The aftermath of the court hearing unfolded like a series of aftershocks following an earthquake. As the officers approached my father to detain him, he seemed to snap. The composed businessman facade crumbled completely, revealing the desperate man beneath. This is your fault, he shouted, pointing at me across the courtroom. After everything I did for you, this is how you repay me, by turning your mother against me, by destroying the family business. The officers took his arms, but he shook them off, turning his rage toward Frank. And you knew what was happening. You helped me. Are you going to pretend now that you didn't know? Frank's face drained of color as all eyes in the courtroom turned to him. Under the weight of those stares, something in him seemed to break. I knew about some of it, he admitted quietly, looking at his shoes. Not everything, but enough. I was afraid to say no. The business was everything to him, to both of us. When things started going wrong with the Kentucky project, he said it was just temporary, just moving some numbers around until things improved. Moving numbers around, the judge interrupted sharply. You mean committing fraud? Frank nodded miserably. It started small. Then it kept growing. I told myself it was to save the company, to save all the employees' jobs. But it got out of control. Judge Wilson made a note. Mr. Parker, the younger, I suggest you also seek legal counsel. Court officer, please take Mr. Wayne Parker into custody pending further investigation. As they led my father away, the mask of respectability completely gone, he continued to shout accusations and threats. The successful businessman, the pillar of the community, was revealed as a fraud in more ways than one. Outside the courtroom, my mother approached me hesitantly, as if unsure of her welcome. She looked older than her 55 years, worn down by decades of submission and fear. I'm so sorry, Dorothy, she said, her voice breaking. I should have said something sooner. I knew something wasn't right with all those papers, but I was too afraid to question him. I hugged her, feeling her frail shoulders shake with suppressed sobs. It's okay, Mom. You did the right thing today. That's what matters. She pulled back, wiping her eyes. I can't go home. Not now. He'll make bail eventually, and I can't be there when he does. You can stay with me in California, I offered immediately. Or we can get you a hotel here for now. She nodded gratefully. I already packed a bag. It's in the car. I've been planning this since you called about the loan. I just needed to find the courage. Barbara joined us, her expression serious but satisfied. This is just the beginning, I'm afraid. The district attorney will want statements from both of you. There will likely be a criminal trial, and we still need to clear Dorothy's credit and resolve the fraudulent accounts. What about Frank? I asked, glancing back at the courtroom where my brother remained talking with his own hastily retained lawyer. Barbara sighed. He's implicated himself in knowledge of the fraud, which could mean criminal charges. How severe those might be depends on his level of involvement and whether he cooperates with the investigation. Over the following days, the full extent of my father's financial manipulations came to light. Wayne Parker Construction was effectively bankrupt, having been kept afloat by a complex web of loans, many taken out in other people's names. The failed Kentucky resort development had been a money pit consuming millions in investment that would never be recovered. As news of his arrest spread, other victims came forward. Two of Dad's employees discovered credit lines opened in their names. A retired couple who had invested in the company found their retirement fund emptied through forged withdrawal authorizations. Even my mother's elderly aunt had a reverse mortgage on her home that she'd never approved. Frank, faced with the collapse of everything he'd worked for, finally broke down and provided prosecutors with detailed information about the company's finances. He revealed how our father had been falsifying books for years, inflating profits, hiding losses, and eventually turning to identity theft when legitimate funding sources dried up. I was a coward, he told me during a tense coffee meeting a week after the court hearing. I knew what he was doing was wrong, but I kept telling myself it was temporary, that it was necessary to save the business. Then it just spiraled, and I was in too deep to get out. You lied about me in court, I reminded him, still unable to forgive that particular betrayal. You said you watched Dad give me money that never existed. He couldn't meet my eyes. He threatened to implicate me in everything if I didn't back him up. Said we'd both go down if I didn't stick to the story. I was trying to save myself. Part of me understood his fear, but another part couldn't forgive so easily. The brother who had once protected me from playground bullies had been willing to sacrifice me to save himself. That wound would take much longer to heal. My mother moved into my apartment temporarily while we sorted out her future. After decades of financial dependence, she had no resources of her own. Everything had been in Wayne's name, and now all those assets were frozen pending the criminal investigation. I don't even know who I am without him, she confessed one night as we sat on my small balcony watching the Los Angeles sunset. 34 years of marriage, and I let him make every decision even when I knew deep down something wasn't right. You can find out who you are now, I told her, holding her hand. It's not too late to start over. Barbara worked tirelessly to help clear my credit, submitting fraud reports with the evidence from the court case. The process was painfully slow, requiring countless phone calls, letters, and documentation. Some companies were responsive. Others fought us at every turn, insisting I needed to pay debts I'd never incurred. The system is designed to protect lenders, not consumers, Barbara explained during one particularly frustrating day of dealing with credit bureaus. Even with court evidence of fraud, getting these accounts removed is an uphill battle. The criminal case against my father moved forward, with additional charges being added as more victims came forward and the investigation deepened. Wayne refused plea deals, maintained his innocence, and blamed everyone but himself for his situation. His former friends and business associates distanced themselves, the community pillars who had once welcomed him to their country club, now pretending they'd always had their suspicions. During one courthouse encounter, I found myself face to face with him in a hallway as he was being led back to holding after a hearing. The arrogant businessman was gone, replaced by a bitter old man in an orange jumpsuit. For a moment our eyes met, and I saw no remorse, only anger and blame. "Happy now?" he asked coldly. "You've destroyed everything I built." "You did that yourself," I replied, finding strength I didn't know I had. "Every time you decided to lie, cheat, and steal instead of facing the truth." He laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "The truth. The truth is, I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me, by putting me in jail. The guard tugged his arm, moving him along, but his words followed me. Not because they hurt, but because I finally recognized them for what they were, the desperate justifications of a man who couldn't face his own failings. 1 year after the court hearing that changed everything, I sat in my new studio office in a converted warehouse in downtown Los Angeles. Sunlight streamed through the industrial windows, illuminating the space where 3 designers now worked under the banner of Parker Design Group. On the wall hung our first major award recognition for a rebranding campaign that had put us on the map in the competitive LA design scene. So much had changed in 12 months. My father, Wayne Parker, had been convicted on multiple counts of fraud, forgery, and identity theft. The judge, citing the betrayal of family trust as an aggravating factor, sentenced him to 8 years in state prison. He was still appealing, still refusing to acknowledge the harm he had caused, still blaming everyone but himself. The business he had built over 30 years was gone, its assets sold to partially repay creditors and victims. The Parker name in Dayton, once associated with success and reliability, now carried the stain of his crimes. Former employees had scattered, finding work where they could in a community still reeling from the scandal. My mother had transformed in ways I never imagined possible. After staying with me for 3 months, she had found a small apartment of her own nearby. At 56, she enrolled in community college courses, starting with basic computer skills and working her way up to accounting classes. The woman who had once been afraid to choose a restaurant without consulting her husband was now making decisions about her future, discovering interests and abilities that had been suppressed for decades. "I should have left him years ago," she told me over lunch one day, her eyes clearer and more confident than I'd ever seen them. But I kept thinking about what people would say, what would happen to you kids, how I would survive financially. I let fear keep me trapped. "You're free now," I reminded her. "That's what matters." Frank's path had been more complicated. He avoided jail time by cooperating fully with prosecutors, but received 5 years probation and community service. The accounting license he had been so proud of was revoked. Last I heard, he was working as a manager at a big box store in Cincinnati, trying to rebuild his life far from the ruins of our family name in Dayton. We spoke occasionally, awkward conversations filled with things unsaid. Healing that relationship would take time if it happened at all. My own journey had been one of professional success alongside personal healing. Once my credit was finally cleared, I was able to secure a small business loan to expand my freelance work into a proper design studio. Janet, who had stood by me through the worst of the ordeal, became my first employee and eventual partner in the business. The experience had also led me to an unexpected side project. Working with Barbara, I developed a workshop series for victims of family financial fraud, sharing my story and providing practical advice for recovery. The first session had been attended by just 4 people. The most recent had filled a conference room with 30. "Financial abuse doesn't get talked about enough," I explained to the group, "especially when it's family members using their access and trust to exploit you. The shame keeps people silent, which only protects the abusers." Through these workshops, I met others whose stories mirrored my own, parents stealing from children's siblings, emptying joint accounts, spouses secretly accumulating debt. Each story reinforced what I had learned through my own experience, that financial abuse was about control as much as money, and that breaking free required both practical action and emotional healing. The practical steps were straightforward. Though challenging, file police reports, contact credit bureaus, secure your personal information, work with lawyers and financial advisors to repair the damage. The emotional healing was harder, an ongoing process of setting boundaries, addressing trauma, and rebuilding trust, both in others and in yourself. What surprised me most was how many people blamed themselves, just as I initially had. They felt stupid for not seeing the signs, guilty for bringing charges against family members, responsible for not preventing the abuse sooner. Part of my work became helping them recognize that the responsibility lay solely with the abuser, not the victim. "Trust isn't a weakness," I would tell them. "It's a necessary part of human connection. The person who betrays that trust is the one who should feel ashamed, not you. As for me, I was still working on forgiveness, not for my father's sake, but for my own. I didn't want to carry anger and resentment forever. Some days were easier than others. Some nights, I still woke from nightmares about courtrooms and forged signatures and financial ruin. But those nights grew less frequent as time passed. The signature that was meant to ruin me became the signature that set me free. Free from my father's control and manipulation. Free to build my business on my own terms. Free to redefine family as the people who supported and believed in me, rather than those who shared my DNA. I created a new signature for myself, literally and figuratively. The Dorothy Parker who emerged from this ordeal was stronger, wiser, and more compassionate than before. She understood boundaries and recognized red flags. She trusted her instincts and stood up for herself. She knew her worth couldn't be measured in dollars or defined by someone else's expectations. My business continued to grow. My mother flourished in her newfound independence. My workshops helped others reclaim their financial autonomy. Even my relationship with Frank showed small signs of potential reconciliation as he worked through his own journey of accountability and amends. Not everything was perfect. The trauma left scars that would always be part of me. But I had built something meaningful from the wreckage of betrayal, a life that was authentically mine, relationships based on genuine care rather than obligation, and the knowledge that I could survive even the deepest family betrayal. If you've ever experienced financial abuse or identity theft, especially from someone you trusted, know that you're not alone. It happens more often than people realize, and it's never your fault. Have you ever had a family member betray your trust? Leave a comment below sharing your experience if you feel comfortable. Like and subscribe. If this story resonated with you, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they can rebuild after betrayal too. Remember, the signature on your life story belongs to you alone, and no one has the right to forge it.